Hey guys, tonight we begin with the surprisingly mundane and not so exotic reality of peacock life. Those magnificent birds we see as symbols of beauty and grandeur strutting through our imagination. While their dazzling plumage makes them seem like nature's royalty, the truth is being a peacock is actually pretty boring most of the time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are 1 week old, and already an expert in the art of spectacular failure. Every step you take is essentially a negotiation with gravity, and let's be honest, you're losing these negotiations badly. Your legs, which seemed like such a good idea in theory, work about as reliably as a chocolate teapot. They fold beneath you at the most inconvenient moments, usually when you're trying to look dignified in front of the other chicks. The morning sun filters through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows across the forest floor. It would be poetic if you weren't currently face first in a pile of decomposing leaves, wondering how walking became so complicated. Other creatures make it look effortless. Squirrels bound from branch to branch, deer glide through the underbrush like they're floating. Even the beetles seem to have figured out the basic mechanics of locomotion. You, meanwhile, approach each step like you're defusing a bomb. Your first serious attempt at feeding goes about as well as expected, which is to say it doesn't go well at all. You spot what appears to be food, small, brown, probably edible, and decide this is your moment to shine. You draw yourself up to your full, admittedly unimpressive height, focus all your concentration on the target, and strike with the precision and grace of a drunk person trying to thread a needle. The result is less successful feeding and more aggressive headbutting of the earth. You peck at the ground with the determination of someone trying to dig to china with a spoon, missing the actual food by margins that would be embarrassing if you were capable of embarrassment at this stage. Each missed peck drives your beak deeper into the dirt, until you're basically just eating soil with occasional organic supplements. The other birds in the area gather to watch this performance, with the kind of fascination typically reserved for traffic accidents or reality television. A robin tilts her head at an angle that suggests she's trying to figure out if you're having some kind of medical emergency. A squirrel pauses mid-acorn gathering to stare, its expression clearly conveying that even by woodland standards of incompetence, this is remarkable. You finally connect with something that might be food. Though it turns out to be a pebble, you chew thoughtfully for several seconds, before realizing your mistake, then spit it out with as much dignity as you can muster, which is approximately none. The watching audience disperses, apparently satisfied that the show is over and you're probably not going to die immediately. As the day wears on, you make several more attempts at basic life skills, each one a masterclass in how not to be a bird. You try preening and somehow manage to get your own feathers tangled. You attempt to scratch an itch and fall over. You see a puddle of water and decide drinking shouldn't be too difficult, then nearly drown in 2 inches of liquid. The other chicks your age seem to be having similar struggles, which is mildly comforting. There's a certain solidarity in shared incompetence. You watch one of your siblings try to fly and achieve roughly the same result as a paper airplane made of concrete. Another gets confused by their own reflection in the water and spends 10 minutes trying to make friends with themselves. By evening, you've accomplished very little beyond proving that being alive is significantly more complicated than it appeared from inside the egg. You've learned that walking requires constant attention, eating requires aim you don't possess, and the world is full of things that seem simple until you try to do them yourself. You settle into what passes for sleep, which is really just standing very still with your eyes closed and hoping nothing interesting happens while you're unconscious. Tomorrow, you decide you'll master at least one basic life skill. This optimism will prove to be adorably misplaced. 3 weeks into your existence, you decide it's time to become a predator. This decision is based on watching other birds do it and thinking, how hard could it be? The answer, as you're about to discover, is significantly harder than it looks. Your target presents itself on a Tuesday morning. One beetle, approximately the size of a large crumb, minding its own business near a fallen log. The beetle appears to be engaged in beetle activities, walking in straight lines, occasionally changing direction for reasons known only to itself, basically living its best beetle life, without any awareness that it's about to become someone's breakfast, or at least someone's ambitious breakfast attempt. You observe your prey from what you consider a strategic distance, which is roughly 15 feet away. In the hunting world, this is equivalent to watching someone through binoculars from another continent, but you don't know this yet. The beetle continues its beetle business, completely oblivious to your presence, which is probably for the best since your stalking technique resembles someone trying to sneak up on their own shadow while wearing tap shoes. You begin your approach with all the stealth and grace of a marching band. Each step is carefully calculated to make the maximum amount of noise while covering the minimum amount of distance. Twigs snap beneath your feet with the enthusiasm of a percussion section. Leaves rustle with each movement like nature's own alarm system. You might as well be wearing a sign that says, "Inexperienced predator approaching." The beetle, displaying the kind of situational awareness that will probably keep it alive well into old age, notices you from roughly a mile away. It doesn't panic, that would give you too much credit. Instead, it simply alters its course slightly, the way you might step aside to avoid a particularly slow-moving piece of street furniture. Its movements suggest it's not so much fleeing as it is politely excusing itself from whatever this situation is supposed to be. Undeterred by this setback, you continue your pursuit. Your strategy, if it can be called that, involves getting progressively closer while making progressively more noise. You're like a one-bird parade, celebrating your own incompetence. The beetle, now clearly aware that something large and clumsy is taking an interest in its day, picks up the pace slightly. Not running, mind you, that would imply you pose some kind of threat, more like brisk walking with purpose. You decide to try a different approach. Speed. You break into what could generously be called a run, though it more closely resembles someone falling forward in slow motion while flapping their arms. Your coordination, never your strong suit, abandons you entirely. You stumble over your own feet, correct yourself, stumble again, and somehow end up moving diagonally while aiming straight. The beetle, now genuinely concerned about the large, noisy creature having what appears to be some kind of episode in its general direction, decides discretion is the better part of valor. It disappears under the log with the kind of casual efficiency that makes professional magicians weep with envy. You arrive at the beetle's last known location approximately 30 seconds later, breathing heavily and looking around with the confusion of someone who's lost their keys in their own pocket. The log sits there, innocent and beetle-free, offering no clues about where your prey might have gone. You peck at it experimentally, as if the beetle might pop out and apologize for the misunderstanding. It doesn't. Frustrated but not defeated, you decide to expand your hunting horizons. You notice a leaf lying nearby, brown and crinkled, clearly not moving, which makes it an ideal target for someone of your current skill level. You approach this leaf with the same intensity you brought to the beetle hunt, apparently having missed the fundamental difference between prey and plant matter that fell off a tree several weeks ago. You spend the next 10 minutes in mortal combat with this leaf. You stalk it, circle it, make aggressive postures at it, and finally pounce. The leaf, being dead and having been dead for quite some time, offers no resistance whatsoever. You grab it triumphantly in your beak, shake it vigorously to assert your dominance, and then realize you've just defeated something that was never alive to begin with. The victory feels hollow, which is appropriate since it's not really a victory at all. You drop the leaf and look around, hoping no one witnessed this performance. A nearby sparrow is watching with an expression that clearly says, "I have seen many things in my time, but this is somehow both the most pathetic and most entertaining hunting attempt I've ever witnessed." You decide to call it a day. Hunting, you conclude, is more complicated than it looks. Perhaps you'll try again tomorrow, when you're older and wiser, and hopefully less likely to be outwitted by plant debris. Living among other young peafowl teaches you uncomfortable truths about society, hierarchy, and your place in the grand scheme of things. That place, it turns out, is roughly equivalent to the kid in school who always ate paste. Not necessarily disliked, but not someone anyone expects great things from either. The pecking order, you discover, is not a metaphor. It's a very real, very literal system where your position is determined by a complex algorithm involving size, aggression, coordination, and something that might charitably be called natural authority. You possess none of these qualities in meaningful quantities, which places you somewhere near the bottom of the social ladder, just above the chick with the permanent hiccups, and slightly below the one who's afraid of his own shadow. Your first attempt at establishing dominance comes on a Thursday morning when you decide you've had enough of being pushed around by everyone. This decision is based on approximately 3 weeks of life experience and a confidence level that has no relationship to your actual abilities. You approach the largest of your siblings, puff up your tiny chest, and issue what you intend to be an intimidating challenge. The sound that emerges is less fearsome battle cry and more squeaky toy being stepped on, The response you receive is about what you might expect when challenging someone twice your size with the physical presence of a particularly assertive cotton ball. Your sibling looks at you with the kind of patient amusement typically reserved for toddlers having tantrums, then simply steps over you and continues with whatever important bird business they were conducting. You're left standing there, puffed up and indignant, like a balloon animal that's developed delusions of grandeur. This initial failure doesn't deter you, if anything. It convinces you that you need to try harder. Over the next several days, you launch a campaign of what can only be described as aggressive mediocrity. You challenge birds to contests you can't win, pick fights you can't finish, and generally conduct yourself with the strategic acumen of someone who's confused warfare with performance art. Each encounter ends the same way, with you learning that confidence and competence are not the same thing, and that enthusiasm cannot substitute for actual skill. Your attempts at intimidation are met with the kind of respect typically reserved for a strongly worded letter from a goldfish. Other birds don't fear you so much as they find you mildly entertaining, like a street performer who's not quite good enough to earn tips but interesting enough to watch for a few minutes. Your breakthrough moment comes during what you initially think will be your most humiliating defeat. A particularly aggressive sibling decides to put you in your place once and for all, approaching with the kind of swagger that suggests they've been waiting for this opportunity. They puff up their feathers, make threatening gestures, and generally carry on like they're auditioning for the role of intimidating bird in a nature documentary. Faced with this overwhelming display of dominance, you make a strategic decision that will define your approach to conflict for years to come. You dramatically flop over and play dead. Not partially dead, not mostly dead, but completely, theatrically, Oscar-worthy dead. You hit the ground with all the grace of a sack of potatoes, stick your legs in the air, and commit to the performance with the dedication of a method actor. The effect is immediate and remarkable. Your aggressor stops mid-swagger, clearly unprepared for this particular response. Playing dead is not part of the standard pecking order protocol. It's neither submission nor defiance, it's something else entirely. Something that doesn't fit into the neat categories of dominance and submission that govern bird society. Other chicks gather around to investigate this unusual development. You lie perfectly still, occasionally letting your tongue loll out for dramatic effect, maintaining the performance with professional dedication. The silence stretches on, broken only by the sound of confused birds trying to figure out what to do with opponent who simply refuse to participate in the conflict. Eventually, everyone gets bored and wanders off to find more conventional entertainment. You wait a few more minutes for dramatic effect, then casually get up and dust yourself off, as if nothing unusual has happened. The strategy has worked better than you could have hoped, not because you've won, but because you've found a way to opt out of the competition entirely. Word of your innovative conflict resolution technique spreads through the bird community with the speed of gossip in a small town. You become known not as a fierce fighter or a weak target, but as something more interesting. The bird who plays dead. It's not exactly the reputation you were hoping for, but it's better than being known as the bird who loses fights to everyone. Your social position stabilizes somewhere in the middle of the hierarchy, not because you've proven yourself through combat, but because you've proven yourself to be unpredictable enough to make conflict more complicated than it's worth. Other birds treat you with a mixture of wariness and amusement, never quite sure what you might do next. This suits you perfectly. You've learned that sometimes the best way to win is to change the rules of the game entirely. Growing up as a peacock is like being enrolled in a biology experiment that no one bothered to explain to you. Your body changes according to its own mysterious schedule, apparently designed by someone who thought it would be funny to make the process as awkward and inconvenient as possible. Each day brings new surprises, none of them particularly welcome. Your tail, which started as a reasonable collection of feathers, begins growing with all the grace and subtlety of a construction project. It sprouts new plumes at random intervals, each one a different length and pointing in a different direction, giving you the appearance of someone who's been electrocuted while holding a feather duster. The magnificent fan that will eventually be your pride and joy currently resembles a broken umbrella having an identity crisis. The timing of these growth spurts seems specifically calculated to maximize embarrassment. Just when you've figured out how to walk without tripping over your own feet, your legs decide to add 3 inches overnight. Your center of gravity shifts without notice, turning simple activities like standing still into complex balancing acts that would challenge a circus performer. You wake up one morning to discover that your neck has grown significantly longer while you slept, which would be fine, except that your brain hasn't received the memo about the new proportions. You spend the day either overreaching for everything or pecking at the air 6 inches above your intended target. Eating becomes an exercise in spatial mathematics that you're failing badly. Your wings present their own challenges. They grow in fits and starts, never quite matching each other in size or enthusiasm. Your left wing decides to be ambitious and shoots ahead, while your right wing apparently needs more time to think things over. This asymmetry turns your early flying attempts into a masterclass in applied physics gone wrong. The first time you try to fly with your mismatched wings, you achieve something that's less graceful gliding and more controlled spiral into the ground. You launch yourself from what seems like a reasonable height about 3 feet off the ground with all the confidence of someone who's watched other birds do this and assumed it looked easy. The reality is that you immediately begin rotating clockwise, your longer wing providing significantly more lift than its confused partner. You spin through the air like a feathered tornado, arms and legs flailing as you try to correct a problem you don't understand. The landing is less touchdown and more archaeological impact event, leaving you buried in a pile of leaves wondering if flying is supposed to involve this much spinning. Other young birds watch these attempts with the kind of fascination typically reserved for natural disasters. They gather in small groups, whispering among themselves, and occasionally wincing when your experiments go particularly wrong. You become something of a cautionary tale, the bird whose growth spurts are so dramatic they require their own safety protocols. Your proportions change weekly, sometimes daily, making you look like you're wearing a costume designed for someone else. Your head grows faster than your body, then your body catches up but your legs fall behind. Then everything grows at once and you spend 3 days looking like you've been inflated by a bicycle pump. You never quite know what shape you'll be when you wake up in the morning. The social implications of this constant transformation are significant. Just when you've figured out how to interact with other birds at your current size, everything changes, and you have to learn all over again. Conversations that worked perfectly well yesterday become awkward when your head is suddenly at a different height than everyone else's. You develop a walking style that can only be described as cautious optimism, each step carefully placed because you're never entirely sure where your feet are in relation to the rest of you. You move through the world like someone navigating a house where all the furniture has been moved slightly from where it was yesterday. The worst part is that you can see what you're supposed to eventually become. Adult peacocks strut past with the kind of confidence that comes from having all your body parts in the right proportions and working in harmony. Their tails spread in perfect fans, their movements are coordinated and graceful. Their very presence suggests that they've mastered the complex art of being a bird. You, meanwhile, are still figuring out how to operate the basic machinery. But there's something oddly comforting about the universality of the struggle. Every other young bird is dealing with their own version of this awkward transformation. You're all in this together, stumbling toward adulthood one growth spurt at a time. The saving grace is that this phase is temporary, though it doesn't feel that way when you're living through it. Eventually, everything will settle into proper proportions. Your coordination will catch up with your ambition, and you'll develop the smooth confidence that comes from actually knowing where all your body parts are at any given moment. But for now, you're content to be a work in progress, a rough draft of a peacock that's still being edited by forces beyond your understanding. Your first winter approaches with all the inevitability and welcome of a tax audit. The signs have been building for weeks. Shorter days, cooler mornings, the kind of wind that feels like nature's way of giving you a preview of coming attractions. Other birds have been making preparations with the efficiency of people who've done this before, while you watch with the growing realization that you're supposed to know what you're doing by now. The concept of preparing for winter sounds straightforward until you actually try to do it. You understand, in theory, that you need more food, better shelter, and some kind of plan that extends beyond hope for the best. The execution of this plan, however, proves to be significantly more complicated than the theory. Your first priority is food storage, a concept that immediately reveals gaps in your education that no one bothered to mention. You watch squirrels burying nuts with systematic efficiency, their movements precise and purposeful. They seem to have some kind of internal GPS system that lets them remember where they've hidden things, plus the mathematical skills to calculate exactly how much food they'll need to survive until spring. You, meanwhile, approach food storage with all the strategic planning of someone packing for a vacation 5 minutes before leaving for the airport. You begin collecting items that seem like they might be food, creating a cache that resembles less survival stockpile and more random collection of things found on the ground. Your storage system is based on the sophisticated principle of put things, places, and try to remember where you put them. This works about as well as you'd expect. Within a week, you've forgotten the location of roughly half your supplies and misidentified the other half. You spend an entire afternoon trying to remember where you hid that particularly good acorn, only to realize you never actually hid an acorn. You hid a rock that looked like an acorn in certain lighting conditions. The shelter situation presents its own challenges. You've spent the warmer months taking refuge wherever was convenient, never really thinking about the long-term sustainability of your housing choices. Now, faced with the prospect of actual weather, you realize that somewhere out of the rain is not the same as somewhere that will keep you alive through winter. You begin scouting for what the real estate industry might generously call fixer-uppers. Your standards are not high, 4 walls would be nice, but 3 walls and optimism might work. A roof is preferable, but you're willing to negotiate. The main requirements are protection from wind, rain, snow, and the kind of cold that makes you question your life choices. Your first attempt at shelter improvement involves a small cave that seems promising until you discover it's already occupied by a family of mice who are not interested in subletters. The negotiation is brief and ends with you retreating, while the mice make it clear that squatters' rights do not apply to birds, no matter how desperate they might be. Your second option is a hollow in a tree that provides excellent protection from the elements and terrible protection from the owl that has apparently been using it as a hunting blind for the better part of autumn. You discover this when you move in and wake up to find 2 large eyes staring at you with the kind of interest that suggests you might be exactly the right size for a midnight snack. Eventually, you settle on a spot that meets most of your requirements and none of your preferences, a gap between 2 large rocks that provides shelter from wind and rain while offering all the comfort and charm of sleeping in a filing cabinet. It's not ideal, but it's yours, and more importantly, nothing else seems to want it. The social aspects of winter preparation prove to be the most educational part of the experience. You discover that huddling for warmth with strangers teaches uncomfortable lessons about personal space, social boundaries, and the complex etiquette of survival. Your first group huddle involves several birds you barely know, all pressed together in a configuration that would be intimate if it weren't so obviously motivated by the desire not to freeze to death. The hierarchy of huddle positioning becomes immediately apparent. The center spots, warmest and most protected, go to the birds with the most social capital or the sharpest beaks. The outer positions, colder and more exposed, are reserved for birds like you who are just grateful to be included in the survival strategy at all. You learn the unspoken rules of group warmth. No unnecessary movement after everyone has settled, no complaining about who's poking what into where, and absolutely no discussion of personal hygiene until spring. These rules are enforced through a combination of social pressure and the understanding that alienating your heat sources in December is a mistake you might not survive. As winter settles in properly, you realize that your preparation efforts, while well-intentioned, were probably inadequate in several important ways. Your food cache is smaller than it should be, your shelter is draftier than you'd hoped, and your survival skills are still largely theoretical. But you've learned something valuable. Winter is less about having perfect preparations and more about adapting to whatever preparations you actually manage to make. You settle in for the long haul, confident in your ability to muddle through and hopeful that spring will arrive before your incompetence becomes truly dangerous. It's not the most reassuring way to face your first winter, but it's honest. And honesty, you've discovered, is often the best you can manage when you're making everything up as you go along. By your first birthday, a milestone marked by nothing more significant than you managing to remember, it's been about a year since you hatched. You've achieved something remarkable. The ability to fool casual observers into thinking you might actually know what you're doing. This is largely due to your tail, which has finally grown long enough to be taken semi-seriously by other birds, even if it still has the organizational structure of a filing system maintained by someone having a nervous breakdown. The tail changes everything. Where once you were clearly identifiable as that awkward young bird who trips over things, you've now graduated to that bird with the decent tail who probably trips over things but with more style. It's a subtle distinction, but in Peacock society, subtle distinctions are the difference between being invited to social gatherings and being the entertainment at them. You've spent considerable time perfecting what you consider to be your signature skill, looking dignified while doing absolutely nothing. This is harder than it sounds, and more valuable than you initially realized. The secret is in the posture head, held at just the right angle to suggest deep thoughts, eyes focused on a middle distance, as if you're contemplating important matters, weight distributed in a way that looks purposeful rather than like you're just trying not to fall over. The morning routine becomes an exercise in performance art. You emerge from your shelter with the unhurried confidence of someone who has places to be, and important bird business to conduct. You don't actually have places to be or important business to conduct. but the other birds don't need to know that. You've learned that confidence is largely a matter of timing and body language, and both of these can be faked with sufficient practice. Your first genuinely successful hunt occurs on a Tuesday afternoon and involves a bug that has been dead for several hours. You discover it lying beneath a shrub, already deceased and requiring no actual hunting skills whatsoever. Nevertheless, you approach it with the stealth and precision of a seasoned predator. Circle it several times to ensure it's properly dead, then claim it with a flourish that suggests you've just completed a complex stalking operation. The victory feels authentic enough that you don't examine it too closely. Success is success, regardless of the circumstances that led to it. And you're not about to let details like, "the prey was already dead when I found it," diminish your sense of accomplishment. You consume your kill with the satisfaction of someone who has finally mastered the ancient art of predation, conveniently overlooking the fact that the most challenging part of the hunt was remembering which end of the bug was the head. This triumph gives you the confidence to attempt more ambitious hunts, with predictably mixed results. You discover that your success rate is inversely proportional to how alive and mobile your target is. Stationary insects, excellent. Slowly moving beetles, challenging but manageable. Anything that can fly or run quickly, still completely beyond your capabilities. But the important thing is that you now have one genuine success to build your reputation on, and you milk that success for all it's worth. When other birds discuss hunting, you can nod knowingly and make vague references to that time with the bug, as if you're a veteran predator sharing war stories. The fact that your war story involves a casualty that died of natural causes is information you keep to yourself. You begin to understand that 90% of being a peacock involves standing around looking important, which is fortunate because standing around is one of your most developed skills. You've always been good at doing nothing, but now you're learning to do nothing with purpose and style. There's an art to purposeful standing that goes beyond simple inactivity. It requires presence, awareness, and the ability to make your mere existence seem like a meaningful contribution to the local ecosystem. The key is location selection. Standing around randomly marks you as lazy or confused, but standing around in the right places suggests that you're monitoring territory, observing social dynamics, or engaged in some other important bird activity that requires your full attention and physical presence. You become an expert at identifying spots where your standing will look most intentional and least like you're just waiting for something interesting to happen. You also develop what you think of as your contemplation face, an expression of mild intensity that suggests deep thinking without committing to any specific thoughts. This face serves you well during social interactions, where you're expected to have opinions about matters you don't understand or care about. You can nod thoughtfully, look contemplative, and let others assume you're processing complex information rather than just trying to remember whether you've eaten lunch yet. As your first year draws to a close, you realize you've made significant progress in the most important skill a peacock can master: the ability to appear competent while having no idea what you're doing. It's not the most impressive accomplishment in the natural world, but it's yours, and that makes it meaningful in its own small way. The confidence you've developed is still largely performance, but performance becomes reality if you maintain it long enough. You may not be the most skilled bird in the forest, but you're no longer the most obviously incompetent one either, and in the complex social ecosystem of bird society, that counts as genuine progress. The quest for your own territory begins with the naive assumption that finding a decent place to live should be straightforward. After all, you reason, there's a lot of forest out there, and most of it appears to be unoccupied by other peacocks. This optimism lasts approximately 20 minutes into your first serious territory hunting expedition, at which point you discover that peacock real estate operates according to rules that make no sense to anyone who hasn't spent years studying the mysterious art of avian property law. Every good spot, you learn, is already taken. The prime locations, clearings with good visibility, reliable food sources, and convenient access to water are occupied by peacocks, who have been there so long they've apparently achieved some kind of mythical status that makes them unmovable. These territorial elders regard you with the patient condescension typically reserved for tourists who ask where they can find authentic local culture in the gift shop. Your first serious territorial negotiation takes place on a Wednesday morning, when you discover what appears to be an unoccupied patch of forest that meets most of your requirements. It's not spectacular, but it has potential: a few decent trees, reasonable ground cover, and most importantly, no obvious signs of current peacock habitation. You spend several hours walking around the area, gradually working up the courage to make your claim official. The process of claiming territory, you discover, is less about planting flags and more about strategic loitering with intent. You begin spending increasing amounts of time in your chosen area, gradually escalating from casual visitor to regular presence, to someone who's clearly thinking about moving in. Each stage requires careful calibration, too aggressive, too fast, and you'll provoke a confrontation you're not prepared for. Too subtle, and other birds will assume you're just lost. You perfect what you think of as your "this was always my plan" expression, a look of calm determination that suggests your presence in any given location is the result of careful consideration rather than random wandering. This expression serves you well when you're challenged by other birds who want to know what you're doing in their general vicinity. You can respond with dignified silence that implies your activities are too important to explain to casual inquirers. The marking of territory proves to be more complex than simply announcing your presence. There's a whole vocabulary of territorial communication that involves strategic placement, timing, and what can only be described as performance art. You spend considerable time walking in carefully planned circles, pausing at significant landmarks, and generally behaving in ways that signal ownership to those who understand the code. Unfortunately, you don't entirely understand the code yourself, which leads to several awkward encounters with birds who interpret your territorial markings as either territorial challenges, mating displays, or evidence that you're having some kind of medical emergency. You refine your technique through trial and error, gradually developing a marking style that's more quiet confidence and less performance art project gone wrong. Your first territorial claim ends up being what the real estate industry might charitably describe as up and coming, a small patch of weeds located behind someone else's prime territory. It's not where you would have chosen to live if you'd had better options, but it's yours, which makes it automatically more valuable than anywhere else you might have ended up. The location has several advantages that you learn to appreciate over time. It's quiet, probably because nothing interesting ever happens there. It's private, mainly because no one else wants to visit. It has character, which is a polite way of saying it has problems that you choose to view as features rather than bugs. You spend considerable effort convincing yourself that this territory was always your first choice, and that any apparent disadvantages are actually sophisticated preferences that other birds are too simple to appreciate. The fact that your territory is essentially a patch of weeds becomes evidence of your unique aesthetic sensibility and your rejection of conventional ideas about what makes a location desirable. The process of establishing yourself as the legitimate occupant of this territory involves weeks of careful presence management. You need to be there enough to establish your claim without appearing to have nothing better to do. You develop a routine that involves arriving at purposeful times, staying for meaningful intervals, and leaving in ways that suggest you have other important territories to attend to. Gradually, other birds begin to accept your presence as a permanent feature of the local landscape. They stop questioning your right to be there and start including your territory in their mental maps of the area. You've achieved something significant. You own a piece of the world, even if that piece is small and not particularly impressive. The territory becomes more valuable once it's officially yours, not because anything about it has changed, but because ownership transforms even modest spaces into meaningful places. You begin to see possibilities you missed before, potential improvements that could transform your patch of weeds into something approaching respectability. Most importantly, you now have a place to be that's unquestionably yours. When other birds ask where you live, you can give them directions to somewhere specific, rather than vague descriptions of "around here somewhere." You've graduated from being a bird who wanders around to being a bird who has a base of operations, and that transformation affects how you see yourself and how others see you. Your territory may not be impressive by conventional standards, but it's yours, and that makes it perfect in all the ways that matter. The time comes, as it inevitably must, to attempt the ancient peacock art of courtship display. Your species is famous throughout the animal kingdom for spectacular mating dances that combine grace, beauty, and athletic prowess in ways that make other birds weep with envy. This reputation puts considerable pressure on your first attempt, which you approach with all the confidence of someone who's watched other peacocks perform and assumed it couldn't possibly be that difficult. You begin preparing for your debut performance weeks in advance, practicing in the privacy of your own territory, where the only witnesses to your rehearsals are a family of field mice who have become surprisingly invested in your success. The mice offer no constructive criticism, but their continued attendance at your practice sessions suggests either genuine interest or the kind of fascination typically reserved for natural disasters. Your tail, while significantly improved from its early awkward phase, still lacks the full magnificent spread that marks a mature peacock's display. What you have is more enthusiastic attempt at magnificence, than breathtaking spectacle of natural beauty. But you're working with the equipment you've got, and enthusiasm has to count for something. The basic mechanics of the display seem straightforward. Spread the tail, fan the feathers, strut in patterns that demonstrate grace and power, make sounds that convey both attraction and dominance. You've observed other peacocks performing these movements with the fluid ease of professional dancers, their every gesture perfectly calibrated to inspire awe and romantic interest. Your first attempt at the tail spread goes about as well as most of your first attempts at anything, which is to say, it doesn't go well at all. Instead of the smooth, controlled fan that you've been visualizing, your tail feathers spread in what can only be described as a controlled explosion. Some feathers extend fully, others get stuck at half-mast, and several seem to be pointing in directions that have nothing to do with the overall design concept. The visual effect is less magnificent peacock in his prime, and more bird, having some kind of technical malfunction. You look like someone trying to operate a broken umbrella in a windstorm, with feathers jutting out at angles that suggest your tail is having an argument with itself about which direction it wants to go. Undeterred by this setback, you proceed to the strutting portion of the display. Strutting, you've observed, involves a particular style of walking that conveys confidence, power, and sexual availability all at once. It's a complex combination of rhythm, posture, and attitude that should look effortless, while requiring considerable coordination and practice. Your strutting technique resembles someone trying to walk while having a mild seizure. Your movements are enthusiastic but uncoordinated, powerful but not particularly graceful, confident in intention but somewhat less convincing in execution. You move across your display area with the determination of someone who knows exactly what they're trying to accomplish, even if the result looks more like interpretive dance than courtship behavior. The vocal component of the display presents its own challenges. Peacock calls are supposed to be impressive demonstrations of vocal power and range, sounds that carry across great distances and announce your presence to potential mates with unmistakable authority. Your call sounds like a rusty gate having an existential crisis, or possibly a large piece of machinery that needs lubrication. The overall effect of your first complete display is unique. You've created something that is undeniably a peacock courtship display, while being completely unlike any peacock courtship display that has ever been successfully performed in the history of the species. It's innovative, certainly, and memorable, though not necessarily for the reasons you were hoping for. Your audience for this inaugural performance consists of 3 female peahens, who happen to be passing through your territory at precisely the wrong moment. They stop to watch with expressions that range from confusion to second-hand embarrassment, like people who've accidentally walked into someone else's private moment and aren't sure whether they should leave or offer assistance. The peahens observe your display with the kind of polite attention typically reserved for amateur theatrical performances by someone's relatives. They're clearly trying to be supportive, but they're also clearly not sure what they're supposed to be supporting. Their expressions suggest they're witnessing something that might be courtship behavior, or might be a medical emergency, and they're not equipped to tell the difference. One of the peahens tilts her head at an angle that suggests she's trying to determine if you're finished or just pausing for dramatic effect. Another makes what might be encouraging sounds, though they could equally well be sounds of concern. The third simply stares with the kind of fascination typically reserved for traffic accidents or particularly unusual weather patterns. You complete your display with what you intend to be a dramatic finale, a full tail spread combined with your most impressive call, and a strutting pattern that's supposed to demonstrate your territorial ownership and reproductive fitness. The actual result is more like someone having a seizure while holding a feather duster and making sounds that suggest serious respiratory distress. The peahens exchange glances that communicate entire conversations without words. After a moment of awkward silence, they nod politely and continue on their way, moving with the kind of purposeful speed that suggests they have somewhere else they need to be immediately. You're left standing in your territory, tail still half spread, wondering if what just happened counts as a successful courtship display, or if you need to go back to the drawing board. The field mice, who witnessed the entire performance, seem impressed. But mice are easily entertained and not particularly discriminating when it comes to peacock courtship rituals. Over the following weeks, you continue to refine your display technique through practice and careful observation of more successful peacocks. Gradually, your performance evolves from complete disaster to well-intentioned amateur effort to something that might charitably be called adequate under ideal circumstances. You never quite achieve the breathtaking magnificence that defines the greatest peacock displays, but you develop something that's recognizably yours. A courtship style that's less about perfection and more about enthusiasm. less about intimidating the competition, and more about hoping someone will find your particular brand of awkward charm endearing. Peacock society, you discover, operates according to an intricate set of social rules that everyone seems to understand except you. It's like arriving at a party where everyone else received the dress code instructions and the behavioral guidelines, while you're left to figure out the system through careful observation and embarrassing trial and error. The hierarchy is invisible but absolute, determined by factors that include age, territory, quality, display prowess, family connections you didn't know existed, and something that might be called social capital, but which seems to involve knowing the right birds and being seen in the right places at the right times. Your position in this hierarchy is somewhere between tolerated and furniture present, occasionally noticed, but not particularly influential in any meaningful decisions. You spend considerable time studying the social dynamics of your local peacock community, trying to decode the complex interactions that determine who gets respect, who gets ignored, and who gets actively avoided. The patterns are subtle but consistent. Certain birds command attention when they speak, while others are routinely interrupted or overlooked entirely. Some peacocks can claim the best roosting spots through simple presence, while others have to negotiate or settle for whatever's left. Your own social navigation strategy develops around the principle of strategic visibility, being present at important social gatherings without being so prominent that you risk saying something that reveals the extent of your ignorance about peacock etiquette. You master the art of meaningful nodding, thoughtful silence, and the kind of neutral expressions that suggest you have opinions about whatever's being discussed without committing to any specific position. The art of the meaningful strut becomes crucial to your social advancement efforts. Every peacock has a signature walking style that communicates their personality, status, and current mood to anyone paying attention. The most successful birds have developed struts that are immediately recognizable and subtly intimidating, walks that suggest they have important places to be and the authority to get there efficiently. Your strut evolves through careful observation and practice. You study the walking styles of successful peacocks, noting the subtle differences between confident striding, casual ambling, and purposeful marching. You experiment with different approaches: the decisive stride of someone with a clear agenda, the leisurely pace of someone who owns their time, the measured step of someone who's thinking deep thoughts while walking. Eventually, you develop what you think of as your signature strut, a style that suggests you're going somewhere important, even when you're just walking in circles around your territory. It's not the most impressive strut in the community, but it's recognizably yours, and consistency is apparently more valuable than innovation when it comes to social signaling. The challenge is learning when and where to deploy your strut for maximum social impact. Strutting too aggressively in the wrong context marks you as insecure or trying too hard. Strutting too casually when the situation calls for authority makes you appear weak or disinterested. The timing and intensity of your strut become crucial elements of social communication that require constant calibration. You gradually become fluent in the complex language of peacock social interaction. The subtle head tilts that indicate agreement, the specific feather movements that suggest disapproval, the precise timing of vocalizations that mark someone as socially aware or completely clueless. It's like learning a foreign language where the grammar is constantly changing, and the consequences of mispronunciation range from mild embarrassment to social exile. Gossip, you discover, travels through the peacock community with the speed and accuracy of a high-quality communication network. Information about territorial disputes, courtship successes and failures, and various social improprieties spreads from bird to bird with remarkable efficiency. Everyone knows everyone else's business, and privacy is less a right than a temporary condition that exists only until someone has something interesting to share. The fact that you're rarely the subject of this gossip network is both blessing and curse. On one hand, it means you're not making dramatic mistakes that become community entertainment. On the other hand, it suggests that your activities are not interesting enough to warrant discussion, which places you firmly in the background character category of local social dynamics. You learn to navigate this gossip network carefully, neither contributing information that might damage your relationships, nor remaining so aloof that you appear antisocial. The key is to be a good listener who occasionally offers neutral observations that demonstrate your awareness of social currents without revealing strong opinions that might alienate potential allies. Your social climbing efforts are hampered by your fundamental misunderstanding of what constitutes impressive behavior in peacock society. You initially assume that success comes from being the loudest, the most aggressive, or the most dramatic. only to discover that true social power is often wielded quietly through relationships, reputation, and the kind of subtle influence that works behind the scenes. The most successful peacocks you observe rarely need to assert their dominance overtly, because their position is secure enough that others defer to them automatically. They've achieved the kind of social authority that makes confrontation unnecessary and competition pointless. Their power is evident in how others behave around them rather than in how they behave toward others. You begin to model your social strategy on these successful birds, focusing less on dramatic gestures and more on consistent reliability. You become someone who can be counted on to show up, pay attention, and contribute appropriately without causing problems or requiring excessive management. It's not the most exciting role in the social ecosystem, but it's stable and sustainable. Over time, your position in the hierarchy stabilizes at a comfortable middle level, not powerful enough to make important decisions, but respected enough to be included in most social activities. You've achieved something valuable, a place in the community that feels secure and authentic, even if it's not particularly glamorous. The gradual development of actual competence happens so slowly that you barely notice it's occurring, until you look back and realize that somewhere along the way you've stopped being completely hopeless at most basic bird activities. It's not that you've become exceptionally skilled. You're still nowhere near the top of any performance categories, but you've achieved something more valuable: reliable adequacy. Your flying ability evolves from controlled falling to what you generously describe as aggressive gliding. The fundamental principles of aerodynamics still seem to work differently for you than for other birds, but you've learned to work with your limitations rather than fight against them. Your flights are less about soaring gracefully through the air, and more about getting from one place to another without requiring medical attention upon landing. The key breakthrough comes when you stop trying to fly like other birds and start flying like yourself. Your style is unique, less elegant than most, more enthusiastic than necessary, with a tendency toward unconventional landing techniques that emphasize survival over style. You develop what you think of as your signature approach: rapid descent, followed by strategic tumbling that usually ends with you upright and relatively uninjured. Other birds initially watch your flights with the kind of concerned fascination typically reserved for experimental aircraft testing, but gradually they become accustomed to your particular approach to aviation. You're known as the bird who lands differently than everyone else, which is not the same as being known as the bird who can't land, and that distinction becomes increasingly important to your self-image. Your alarm call, which initially sounded like a rusty gate having an existential crisis, develops into something that might charitably be described as distinctive. You never achieve the clear, powerful call that marks a truly impressive peacock, but you create something that's recognizably yours, a sound that other birds associate specifically with you, for better or worse. The call serves its basic function of communication, even if it doesn't do so with particular elegance. Other birds understand what you're trying to convey, which is the important thing, and they've learned to interpret your vocal style as part of your overall personality, rather than evidence of a medical condition. You've achieved functional communication, which is more than you had when you started. Foraging evolves from desperately flailing at anything that might be food to what you prefer to call casual incompetence. You've developed a systematic approach to finding and identifying edible items that works reliably, even if it's not particularly efficient. Your success rate has improved dramatically, mainly because you've learned to lower your standards and broaden your definition of acceptable food. You develop what becomes your signature foraging technique: methodical investigation of promising areas, combined with realistic expectations about what you're likely to find. You're not the fastest forager in the forest, or the most selective, but you're consistent and thorough, which means you rarely go hungry, even if you rarely feast on premium items. Your palate expands to include various types of dirt and insects that you initially dismissed as inedible. You discover that many things that look unappealing are actually quite nutritious, and that your survival doesn't depend on finding only the most attractive food sources. This flexibility becomes one of your most valuable survival skills. The sophistication of your palate develops to the point where you can distinguish between different types of soil based on mineral content and nutritional value. You become something of a connoisseur of dirt, able to identify the best spots for various types of foraging based on subtle differences in ground composition that other birds overlook. Your hunting skills never reach the level of impressive predation, but they develop to the point where you can successfully catch small, slow-moving prey under ideal conditions. You specialize in insects that are either already injured, significantly older than you, or distracted by more interesting things than avoiding capture. It's not the most dramatic hunting style, but it's sustainable. You learn to identify the optimal hunting conditions for someone of your particular skill set. Overcast days when insects are slower, areas where prey has limited escape routes, times of day when your targets are naturally less alert. You become an expert in opportunistic predation, not creating opportunities so much as recognizing them when they present themselves. The overall effect of this skill development is that you gradually become a competent, if unexceptional, adult peacock. You can perform all the basic functions required for survival and social participation, even if you can't perform any of them with particular distinction. You've achieved something valuable, the ability to live successfully as yourself, rather than as a poor imitation of other, more naturally gifted birds. Your competence is earned rather than inherited, developed through persistent effort rather than natural talent, which gives it a different character than the effortless abilities of more gifted peacocks. You know exactly how much work goes into making things look easy, which makes you both more appreciative of others' skills and more confident in your own hard-won capabilities. Most importantly, you've learned that competence and excellence are not the same thing, and that competence is sufficient for most of life's requirements. You don't need to be the best at anything to live successfully. You just need to be good enough at enough things to handle whatever situations arise. This realization transforms your relationship with your own abilities and limitations, allowing you to take pride in your achievements without being embarrassed by your shortcomings. You've become someone who knows what they can and can't do, and who has learned to work effectively within those parameters. After years of making do with substandard real estate, you finally achieve what can only be described as a genuine territorial upgrade. This success comes not through dramatic conquest or impressive displays of dominance, but through the more prosaic combination of persistent presence and other birds gradually losing interest in locations they once defended fiercely. It's not the most glorious path to property ownership, but it's effective, and you've learned that effectiveness matters more than drama. Your new territory represents what you consider to be the pinnacle of peacock real estate achievement. One genuinely good perching tree and several bushes that, while questionable in various ways, provide adequate cover and reasonable foraging opportunities. The tree, a mature oak with excellent sightlines and comfortable branch spacing, becomes the crown jewel of your domain, the feature that transforms your territory from place where I live to place worth defending. The perching tree offers everything a discerning peacock could want. Multiple levels for different weather conditions, branches positioned at optimal angles for both comfort and visibility, and a commanding view of the surrounding area that allows you to monitor your domain while appearing majestically contemplative. It's the kind of tree that other peacocks notice and comment on, the sort of territorial feature that elevates your social status simply through association. The questionable bushes, while not individually impressive, collectively provide the kind of diverse habitat that makes a territory genuinely functional. There's the dense shrub that offers excellent shelter during storms, even if it has an unfortunate tendency to drop sticky sap on anyone who uses it. The berry bush that produces food sporadically and unpredictably, making it more of a gambling operation than a reliable resource. The flowering bush that looks magnificent for 3 weeks every spring and resembles a collection of dead sticks for the remaining 49 weeks of the year. Territory maintenance, you discover, is less about dramatic defensive actions and more about consistent administrative presence. Your daily routine revolves around what you think of as territorial patrol, which mostly involves walking around your property looking purposeful while secretly hoping no one challenges your ownership. The key is to appear confident and alert without seeming paranoid or aggressive, a delicate balance that requires considerable practice to master. Your morning territorial routine becomes a carefully choreographed performance of ownership. You emerge from your roosting spot with the deliberate purpose of someone beginning an important work day. Survey your domain with the satisfaction of someone reviewing a successful business operation, then begin your patrol with the measured pace of someone who has specific places to be and important things to accomplish there. The patrol route you develop hits all the important territorial landmarks, the good tree for a comprehensive overview, the boundary markers where you can refresh your scent claims, the prime foraging areas that need regular monitoring, and the questionable bushes that require periodic assessment to determine if they've become more or less questionable since your last visit. The entire circuit takes about an hour and gives you the appearance of someone actively managing their property rather than just wandering around it. The most challenging aspect of territorial ownership proves to be the psychological pressure of constant vigilance. You're responsible for defending something valuable, which means you can't relax completely even in your own space. Every unfamiliar sound could be a territorial challenge. Every visiting bird could be a potential invader. Every change in your environment could signal the beginning of a property dispute you're not prepared to handle. You develop what you think of as your territorial presence, a subtle but unmistakable air of ownership that communicates your status to any bird paying attention. It's a combination of posture, movement patterns, and the kind of casual confidence that comes from being somewhere you have every right to be. This presence becomes second nature after months of practice, an automatic response that activates whenever you're in your territory. The social implications of owning decent territory transform your position in the local peacock community in ways you didn't anticipate. Other birds treat you with a level of respect that has nothing to do with your personal qualities and everything to do with the fact that you control access to a prime perching tree. You become someone worth maintaining good relationships with, not because of your sparkling personality, but because you have something other birds occasionally want to use. This transformation from bird with questionable real estate to bird with valuable territory affects how you see yourself as much as how others see you. You develop the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have a secure base of operations, a place that's unquestionably yours and worth defending if necessary. It's the first time in your adult life that you feel genuinely settled rather than temporarily accommodated. Your territory becomes more than just a place to live. It becomes an extension of your identity, a physical space that reflects and reinforces your status as a successful adult peacock. The quality of your real estate serves as a constant reminder that you've achieved something meaningful through persistence and patience, even if the achievement doesn't look particularly dramatic from the outside. The daily experience of territorial ownership settles into a comfortable routine that provides structure and purpose to your days. You wake up knowing exactly where you are and what you need to do to maintain your position there. You have responsibilities that matter, resources that require management, and a space that's genuinely yours to shape according to your preferences and needs. Mating season arrives each year with the predictability of taxes and the welcome of a root canal, transforming your normally peaceful territory into a stage for what can only be described as an extended exercise in public embarrassment. Your courtship displays have evolved considerably since those early disasters. You've progressed from complete catastrophe to what you generously describe as almost impressive on a good day. But the competition has evolved too, and they seem to have evolved faster and in more aesthetically pleasing directions. The preparation for mating season begins weeks before the actual courtship period, as you attempt to bring your display skills up to something approaching competitive standards. Your tail, now fully mature and properly organized, can achieve something resembling the magnificent fan that defines peacock courtship, though it still requires careful positioning and favorable lighting conditions to look truly spectacular. You practice your display in private, working on the timing and coordination that separate adequate performances from genuinely impressive ones. Your rivals in this annual competition appear to have received instruction manuals that were never distributed to you. They execute their displays with the kind of effortless precision that suggests either natural talent or access to advanced training that you somehow missed. Their tails spread in perfect fans. Their struts follow classic patterns that seem choreographed by professionals, and their calls carry across the forest with the authority of birds who never doubt their own magnificence. You, meanwhile, have developed what you prefer to think of as your own distinctive style, less technically perfect than the competition, but more authentic and personally expressive. Your displays are recognizably yours, with signature moves that no other peacock attempts, mostly because no other peacock would consider them improvements over traditional techniques. You've learned to work with your limitations rather than fight against them, creating performances that are memorable even if they're not always impressive. The strategy you've developed over years of mating season experience is based on persistence rather than perfection. While the flashiest males compete for the attention of the most discerning females, you position yourself as the reliable alternative, not the first choice, perhaps, but a solid backup option when the spectacular displays don't result in actual relationships. You're the peacock equivalent of comfort food, not exotic, but dependable and ultimately satisfying. Your success rate hovers in the range you've learned to describe as better than expected, worse than hoped. It's not a terrible record, considering the level of competition and your own acknowledged limitations. But it's not the kind of romantic triumph that inspires epic poetry either. You approach each mating season with realistic expectations and a well-developed sense of humor about your own romantic limitations. The social dynamics of mating season transform your normally quiet territory into something resembling a combination of performance venue and diplomatic meeting ground. Male peacocks who normally avoid each other find themselves in close proximity, competing for the attention of females who seem to enjoy the drama more than any individual participant. The atmosphere becomes charged with testosterone and territorial tension that makes everyone slightly more aggressive than usual. You've learned to navigate these heightened social dynamics by maintaining a low profile during the most intense competitive periods and making your moves when the attention is focused elsewhere. Your courtship style emphasizes persistence and availability rather than dramatic gestures, which means you're often still displaying long after the flashier males have exhausted themselves or moved on to other territories. The female response to your displays has evolved from confusion and second-hand embarrassment to something approaching polite interest with realistic expectations. You're no longer the peacock who makes females wonder if you're having a medical emergency, though you're not quite the peacock who makes them swoon with desire either. You occupy the middle ground of acceptable mating option under the right circumstances. Your courtship conversations, such as they are, tend to be refreshingly honest about mutual expectations and compatibility. You've developed a reputation as someone who doesn't oversell his capabilities or make promises his performance can't support. This honesty sometimes leads to surprisingly successful relationships with females who appreciate straightforward communication over dramatic gestures that may not reflect actual personality traits. The physical demands of mating season leave you exhausted, but oddly satisfied each year. You've participated fully in the ancient ritual of peacock courtship, contributed your genetic material to the next generation when circumstances allowed, and maintained your dignity, even when your displays didn't achieve the artistic heights you were aiming for. You've learned to measure success in terms of participation rather than domination. The aftermath of each mating season brings a mixture of relief and accomplishment. You've survived another year of romantic competition, formed whatever relationships were available to someone of your particular appeal level, and managed to avoid the kind of dramatic failures that become community legends. You've maintained your position as a viable, if not spectacular, member of the local breeding population. Most importantly, you've learned to find satisfaction in your own authentic approach to courtship, rather than measuring yourself against peacocks whose natural gifts operate in different areas. Your mating season performances may not win awards for technical excellence, but they're genuinely yours, and that authenticity has its own value in a world full of birds trying to be something they're not. The reality of adult peacock life settles into a routine that would surprise anyone who imagines the existence of a magnificent bird to be filled with constant drama and spectacular activities. The truth is considerably more mundane, revolving around a schedule that prioritizes basic maintenance, territorial security, and the kind of purposeful standing that constitutes the bulk of professional peacock work. Your day begins at 6 a.m. with what you've learned to think of as morning majesty, the crucial first hour when you establish the tone for the entire day by looking as impressive as possible while your energy levels are at nut-chi, their peak. This involves emerging from your roosting spot with deliberate dignity, surveying your territory with the satisfaction of someone reviewing a successful business operation, and positioning yourself in your prime perching location where the morning light shows your plumage to best advantage. The morning majesty routine serves multiple functions. It announces your continued ownership of your territory to any birds who might have developed ambitious ideas overnight, demonstrates to your neighbors that you remain a vital presence in the local community, and gives you the psychological boost that comes from starting each day with a successful performance of peacock identity. It's not particularly exciting, but it's important, and you've learned to take pride in doing important things well. 7 a.m. brings the first meal of the day, an activity that requires careful balance between nutritional necessity and aesthetic presentation. You've developed techniques for eating that maintain your dignity even when the available food sources are less than glamorous. The key is to approach every meal as if it's exactly what you intended to eat, rather than whatever happened to be available. Maintaining the illusion of choice, even when your options are limited. Your foraging style has evolved into something you think of as discriminating opportunism. You take what you can get, but you take it with style. You've learned to make even the consumption of questionable insects look like a deliberate culinary choice rather than desperate hunger. This skill serves you well during social meals, when other birds are watching your eating habits for signs of weakness or desperation. The bulk of your day, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., consists of what constitutes the core of peacock professional activity, standing in various locations with purpose and dignity. This is not as simple as it might appear to casual observers. Effective standing requires careful location selection, optimal posture maintenance, appropriate awareness levels, and the ability to make your presence seem both meaningful and effortless. Your standing locations are chosen according to a sophisticated algorithm that takes into account visibility, comfort, territorial significance, and social messaging. The morning standing sessions take place in high visibility areas, where your presence reinforces your territorial claims and demonstrates your continued vitality. The late morning standings move to more comfortable spots where you can maintain your dignity while giving your feet a rest. The art of purposeful standing involves more than simply remaining stationary. You must appear alert but not anxious, confident but not aggressive, approachable but not weak. Your posture communicates your current mood and availability to other birds, while your gaze patterns suggest either territorial vigilance or philosophical contemplation, depending on the social context you're trying to create. Midday brings what you've learned to call rest standing, a modified version of regular standing that allows for partial relaxation while maintaining the appearance of continued vigilance. This involves finding a comfortable position where you can stand with your eyes closed without looking like you've abandoned your responsibilities or fallen asleep on the job. It's a delicate balance that requires practice to master convincingly. The afternoon standing sessions, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., involve more location variety as you conduct what amounts to a second territorial patrol disguised as casual repositioning. You move from standing spot to standing spot with the measured pace of someone conducting important business, pausing at each location long enough to demonstrate ownership while maintaining forward momentum that suggests ongoing purpose. Occasionally, afternoon standing sessions are interrupted by walking, though this walking is always purposeful and territorial rather than recreational. You walk between standing locations. You walk to investigate interesting developments in your territory. You walk to refresh boundary markers. And you walk to demonstrate to observing birds that your mobility remains unimpaired by age or complacency. The evening brings social activities that you approach with the resigned tolerance of someone fulfilling social obligations rather than pursuing personal pleasure. Evening socializing involves gathering with other local birds to share information, establish social hierarchies, and generally participate in the community dynamics that make solitary living possible. These gatherings are often more political than social, requiring careful attention to conversational dynamics and alliance management. Your evening meal follows similar principles to your morning meal, with the added complexity of often taking place in social settings where your eating habits contribute to others' assessments of your overall status and competence. You've learned to eat socially while maintaining your individual dignity, participating in group meals without appearing desperate for company or approval. The day concludes with the evening roosting routine, a process that requires careful selection of sleeping spots based on security, comfort, and accessibility to tomorrow's planned activities. Your roosting choices reflect your current status, territorial confidence, and assessment of overnight security needs. The best roosting spots are earned through social position and territorial success, rather than simply claimed through aggression. This daily routine provides the structure and purpose that make adult peacock life sustainable and meaningful. Each activity serves multiple functions, contributing to territorial security, social positioning, physical health, and psychological well-being. The routine is less exciting than outside observers might expect, but it's genuinely satisfying in ways that dramatic events rarely achieve. The cumulative effect of following this routine consistently is a life that feels stable, purposeful, and authentically peacock-like, without requiring constant drama or exceptional achievements. You've learned to find satisfaction in doing ordinary things well rather than pursuing extraordinary things unsuccessfully, and this shift in perspective has made your daily existence both more comfortable and more sustainable. Each season brings its own particular set of challenges that transform your comfortable daily routine into a series of adaptation exercises, testing your ability to maintain peacock dignity while dealing with weather conditions that seem specifically designed to make looking magnificent as difficult as possible. Summer arrives like an over-enthusiastic personal trainer, bringing temperatures that make your magnificent plumage feel like wearing a fur coat in a sauna. The heat transforms your normally comfortable territory into something resembling a solar experiment. With surfaces too hot to stand on comfortably and shade so valuable, it becomes a territorial resource worth defending. Your daily routine requires complete restructuring around temperature management and strategic shade utilization. The irony of summer is that while the heat makes you desperately uncomfortable, it also makes you look absolutely spectacular. Your plumage achieves a kind of jewel-like brilliance in the strong sunlight that makes casual observers stop and stare with genuine admiration. You look fabulous while sweating, which creates an interesting tension between physical discomfort and aesthetic achievement that defines much of your summer experience. Your summer adaptation strategy involves becoming essentially nocturnal during the hottest parts of the day, compressing all necessary activities into the cooler morning and evening hours, while spending midday in whatever shade you can find, trying to look dignified while essentially hiding from the sun. This schedule works reasonably well, though it requires careful timing to avoid looking like you're desperately fleeing from weather rather than making sophisticated lifestyle choices. Fall brings what you've learned to think of as the annual molting disaster, a natural process that temporarily transforms you from magnificent peacock into something resembling a feathered construction site. Your plumage abandons ship according to its own mysterious schedule, leaving you looking like you've been in a fight with a pillow factory and lost. The molting process is both natural and necessary, but it's also deeply embarrassing for someone whose entire identity is built around looking impressive. The challenge of maintaining dignity during molting season requires considerable creativity and strategic positioning. You learn to arrange yourself so that your remaining feathers hide the worst of the bald spots, to time your public appearances for optimal lighting conditions, and to develop conversational techniques that draw attention away from your temporary aesthetic challenges. The key is to act like your current appearance is exactly what you intended, rather than the result of a natural process beyond your control. Your social interactions during molting season require careful management of other birds' expectations and reactions. Some birds politely pretend not to notice your condition, while others seem to find your temporary bedraggled state genuinely amusing. You develop strategies for dealing with both responses, maintaining your social position despite looking like someone who's been through a natural disaster. Winter transforms your territory into something resembling an endurance test, with cold temperatures that make every activity more difficult, and food shortages that turn daily foraging into strategic resource management. The comfortable routines of warmer seasons become exercises in survival that require constant attention to basic needs, like warmth, shelter, and caloric intake. The psychological challenges of winter are as significant as the physical ones. The short days and grey weather create a general atmosphere of endurance rather than enjoyment, where the goal shifts from thriving to surviving. Your territorial activities become focused on resource conservation and weather protection, rather than impressive displays and social positioning. Your winter survival strategy involves what you think of as dignified misery, maintaining your peacock identity while acknowledging the reality of seasonal limitations. You learn to look purposefully contemplative while you're actually just trying to stay warm, to make resource gathering look like recreational foraging, and to present huddling for warmth as a social choice, rather than a desperate survival measure. Spring brings its own chaos in the form of renewed territorial disputes, the stress of mating season preparation, and the general upheaval that comes when every bird in the forest simultaneously decides it's time to be more active and aggressive. The mild weather that makes spring pleasant also makes everyone else more energetic, creating social dynamics that require careful navigation and conflict management. The challenge of spring is managing the transition from winter's focus on survival to the more complex social and reproductive demands of the active season. You must rapidly shift from conservation mode to competitive mode, updating your territorial displays, refreshing your courtship skills, and generally preparing for months of increased social activity after a winter of relative isolation. Your spring preparation routine involves what amounts to a comprehensive personal renovation project. Upgrading your appearance as new feathers grow in, reclaiming any territorial boundaries that may have shifted during your winter absence, and practicing social skills that have gotten rusty during months of reduced interaction. It's exhausting but also energizing, marking the beginning of another cycle of peacock life. Each seasonal transition teaches you something about adaptation and resilience, showing you that maintaining peacock identity doesn't require ignoring environmental challenges, but rather finding ways to be authentically yourself while responding effectively to changing conditions. You learn to embrace the rhythm of seasonal change rather than fighting against it, using each season's particular challenges as opportunities to develop different aspects of your peacock capabilities. The cumulative effect of successfully navigating multiple seasonal cycles is a deep confidence in your ability to maintain your essential identity while adapting to whatever conditions arise. You become someone who knows that looking magnificent is not about perfect circumstances, but about bringing your best self to whatever circumstances actually exist. The appearance of humans in your territory is always an event, though not necessarily a concerning one. These large, awkward creatures arrive sporadically with their peculiar equipment and behaviors, creating temporary disruptions that are more amusing than threatening. You've learned to categorize human encounters based on their equipment and behavior patterns. The camera people, the food bringers, the loud talkers, and the quiet watchers. each requiring slightly different management strategies. The camera people are the most predictable category of human visitor, arriving with equipment that seems designed to capture images of you in your natural state. They approach with the kind of barely contained excitement typically reserved for religious experiences or lottery wins, pointing their mechanical devices in your direction while making the sort of appreciative noises that suggest they find your basic existence remarkably impressive. What's particularly amusing about the camera people is their apparent belief that your normal daily activities constitute performance art worthy of extensive documentation. They photograph you standing, which you do constantly anyway. They photograph you walking, as if peaceful locomotion were a rare and remarkable behavior. They photograph you preening, eating, and generally conducting the routine business of being a peacock, treating each mundane activity like a spectacular natural phenomenon. You've learned to work with the camera people's expectations rather than against them. When you notice their arrival, you position yourself in locations with good lighting and clear sight lines, maintaining your normal activities while making subtle adjustments that improve the photographic opportunities. It's not vanity. You genuinely don't care about the photographs themselves, but accommodating their interests makes the encounters more pleasant for everyone involved. The reaction of camera people to your courtship displays borders on the ridiculous. Behaviors that other peacocks view with polite tolerance or mild amusement send camera people into states of apparent ecstasy. They make excited sounds, adjust their equipment frantically, and generally carry on as if they're witnessing the most spectacular entertainment ever created. Their enthusiasm is flattering, even if it seems disproportionate to the actual impressiveness of your display. The food bringers represent a more complex category of human interaction, arriving with offerings that range from appropriate peacock nutrition to items that suggest a fundamental misunderstanding of your dietary requirements. The best food bringers bring things you actually want to eat and present them in ways that allow you to maintain your dignity while accepting their offerings. The worst bring inappropriate items and seem hurt when you politely decline their gifts. You've developed techniques for managing food bringer encounters that preserve both their feelings and your nutritional standards. You accept offerings graciously when they're suitable, sample them politely when they're questionable but harmless, and redirect attention to more appropriate alternatives when they're completely unsuitable. The key is making food bringers feel appreciated while maintaining your own health and dietary preferences. The loud talkers create the most challenging human encounters, arriving in groups that seem to believe volume is directly related to communication effectiveness. They point at you while making excited sounds, often attempting to attract your attention through increasingly dramatic gestures and vocalizations. Their enthusiasm is genuine but overwhelming, creating situations that require careful management to avoid escalation. Your strategy for dealing with loud talkers involves what you think of as dignified acknowledgement, making eye contact to show you're aware of their presence while maintaining enough distance to avoid being overwhelmed by their energy. You've learned to interpret their excited pointing and calling as expressions of appreciation rather than challenges or threats, which makes their behavior more tolerable even when it's disruptive. The quiet watchers represent the most pleasant category of human encounter, arriving alone or in small groups and observing your activities with the kind of respectful attention that suggests genuine interest rather than entertainment seeking. These humans seem to understand that they're visitors in your space and behave accordingly, maintaining appropriate distances and avoiding behaviors that might disturb your normal routines. You find yourself actually enjoying encounters with quiet watchers, who seem to appreciate the subtleties of peacock behavior that other categories of humans miss entirely. They notice the small details of your daily routine, the seasonal changes in your appearance and behavior, and the complex social dynamics that govern your interactions with other birds. Their attention feels more like genuine interest than casual entertainment seeking. The presence of humans in your territory usually correlates with easier access to food resources, either through direct offerings or through the increased insect activity that their presence seems to generate. Human visits often result in improved foraging opportunities that last for days after their departure, making even disruptive encounters ultimately beneficial to your overall well-being. Over time, you've learned to view human encounters as temporary environmental changes rather than threats or major disruptions. They arrive, conduct their mysterious human activities while expressing varying levels of appreciation for your magnificence, then depart, leaving your territory essentially unchanged, except for whatever food benefits their presence might have generated. The most valuable lesson from human encounters is the reminder that your normal daily existence genuinely impresses observers who aren't accustomed to peacock society. Activities that feel routine and unremarkable to you, Your graceful movements, your magnificent plumage, your dignified bearing actually are quite impressive when viewed from outside perspectives. Human reactions serve as regular confirmation that you've achieved something worthwhile simply by being authentically yourself. This outside validation becomes particularly meaningful during periods when Peacock social dynamics make you feel ordinary or unremarkable. The genuine enthusiasm of human observers reminds you that ordinariness is a relative concept, and that your normal existence contains elements of genuine beauty and interest that deserve appreciation, even if that appreciation comes from creatures who don't fully understand what they're observing. By the time you reach what could generously be called middle age, though Peacock aging is more of a gradual settling than a dramatic transition, you've achieved something remarkable, complete acceptance of what your life actually is, rather than what you once thought it might become. This acceptance isn't resignation so much as recognition, the kind of peaceful acknowledgement that comes when reality finally aligns with expectations that have been properly calibrated through years of experience. You've accepted that life is mostly standing around, and you're surprisingly okay with this revelation. What once felt like a limitation of Peacock existence now feels like its essential wisdom. Standing, you've discovered, is not the absence of activity, but rather activity distilled to its purest form. When you stand in your territory, you're simultaneously monitoring your domain, maintaining your presence, demonstrating your continued vitality, and participating in the ancient Peacock tradition of dignified territorial occupation. Your morning routine has evolved into something approaching art. You emerge from your roosting spot with the unhurried confidence of someone who has nowhere urgent to be, because they're already exactly where they need to be. The first hour of each day unfolds according to a schedule so well established that you could perform it unconsciously. Though you never do, the ritual requires conscious participation to maintain its meaning and effectiveness. The 6 a.m. territorial survey has become less about checking for overnight changes and more about reaffirming your connection to your space. You move through your established route with the measured pace of someone conducting a familiar ceremony, pausing at each significant landmark, not to search for problems, but to acknowledge your ongoing relationship with the physical features that define your world. Your prime perching tree, now showing its own signs of middle age with a few dead branches and some bark irregularities, has become more than just a territorial feature. It's become a partner in your daily existence. You know exactly how the morning light falls across its branches at different times of year, which perches offer the best protection from various weather conditions, and how the tree's subtle seasonal changes reflect and complement your own gradual transformation. The questionable bushes that once seemed like territorial compromises have revealed their true value through years of consistent use. The sticky sap shrub provides unmatched shelter during storms, and you've learned to position yourself to avoid the worst of its adhesive tendencies. The unpredictable berry bush has taught you patience and the value of opportunistic foraging. The seasonally magnificent flowering bush has shown you that beauty doesn't require consistency to be worthwhile. Your territory maintenance routine has evolved from anxious patrol to comfortable administration. You no longer walk your boundaries, wondering if someone might challenge your ownership. You walk them, because walking them is what territorial peacocks do, and you've become comfortable with being exactly the kind of peacock you are. Your presence reinforces your claim, not through aggressive display, but through the simple fact of your continued existence in this space. Other peacocks in the area have gradually begun to treat you with a level of respect that surprises you until you realize it's based on something you never expected to achieve: seniority. You've outlasted several flashier competitors who arrived with great fanfare and territorial ambitions, then moved on when they discovered that success requires persistence rather than just initial enthusiasm. Your quiet consistency has become a form of achievement that other birds recognize and value. The respect you've earned isn't based on being the most impressive peacock in the area. You're still not that gruff, and probably never will be, but on being a reliable presence who has successfully maintained his territory and position through multiple seasons and various challenges. You've become the kind of neighbor other birds can count on to be where he's supposed to be, doing what he's supposed to do, without creating drama or requiring special accommodation. Your daily routine has achieved a kind of perfection through repetition and refinement. Every activity serves multiple purposes and connects to every other activity in ways that maximize efficiency while maintaining the appearance of leisurely purposefulness. You've learned to make necessary tasks look like lifestyle choices, and lifestyle choices look like important peacock business. The art of looking busy while doing absolutely nothing productive has become one of your signature skills. You can spend hours engaged in what appears to be meaningful activity, while actually just maintaining your presence and monitoring your environment. This isn't deception. It's sophisticated multitasking that allows you to accomplish several important but invisible objectives simultaneously. Your standing sessions have evolved into something approaching meditation. The 3 p.m. standing period, in particular, has become a time for genuine contemplation and reflection, though you're careful to maintain the appearance of territorial vigilance. You've learned to think deep thoughts while looking alertly purposeful, processing complex ideas about life and Peacock existence while appearing to monitor your domain for security threats. The social dynamics of your position have settled into comfortable patterns that require minimal active management. Other birds know what to expect from you and how to interact with you in ways that work for everyone involved. You've achieved social stability through consistency rather than charisma, becoming someone other peacocks can predict and rely on even if they don't find you particularly exciting. Your territorial routine has become so well established that it operates almost automatically, freeing your mental resources for more interesting pursuits like philosophical reflection and careful observation of the world around you. You notice things now that you missed during your more anxious years: subtle, seasonal changes, complex social dynamics among other creatures, the intricate patterns of light and weather that shape daily life in your territory. The comfort you found in routine extends beyond simple habit to something approaching wisdom. You've learned that consistency creates freedom rather than limiting it, that having a reliable structure allows for genuine spontaneity when interesting opportunities arise. Your established routine serves as a foundation for authentic living rather than a constraint on it. Years of peacock existence have gradually accumulated into something that might charitably be called wisdom, though it's a very practical and unromantic form of wisdom that focuses more on effective living than profound insights. You've learned things that can't be taught, only experienced, and these lessons have shaped your approach to daily life in ways that make everything slightly easier and more satisfying. The best food, you've discovered through extensive research and numerous disappointments, is almost always located in the most inconvenient places. This isn't cosmic irony, it's simple logic. The easily accessible food sources are quickly depleted by other creatures, while the difficult-to-reach items remain available precisely because most animals aren't willing to invest the effort required to obtain them. This knowledge has transformed your foraging strategy from opportunistic wandering to strategic planning. You now approach foraging with the patience of someone who understands that quality requires effort. The premium insects hide under logs that need to be moved, in crevices that require careful extraction techniques, and in areas that demand uncomfortable positioning or extended patience. The mediocre food sits out in the open where everyone can see it, which means everyone does see it, and it disappears quickly. Your foraging technique has evolved into something resembling archaeology, combined with investment strategy. You identify promising locations based on environmental clues, commit the time and effort required for thorough investigation, and treat each successful find as validation of your systematic approach, rather than lucky accident. This methodology yields consistently better results than random searching, though it requires more patience than your younger self possessed. Weather, you've learned with the certainty that only comes from experiencing multiple years of seasonal variation, happens whether you like it or not. This seems obvious, until you realize how much energy you used to spend resisting or resenting weather conditions that were completely beyond your control. Your relationship with weather has evolved from adversarial to collaborative, working with conditions rather than against them. Rain no longer represents a personal affront to your daily plans. It's simply information that affects how you implement those plans. Hot weather isn't a punishment, but a condition that requires specific adaptations. Cold weather isn't suffering, but an environmental challenge that calls for particular strategies. This shift from emotional reaction to practical response has made weather a much smaller source of stress and a much larger source of useful data. You've developed sophisticated weather prediction abilities based on subtle environmental cues that younger birds miss entirely. The particular quality of morning light that indicates afternoon rain, the specific wind patterns that suggest temperature changes, the behavior of other animals that signals approaching weather systems. This predictive ability allows you to adjust your routine proactively rather than reactively, staying ahead of conditions instead of being surprised by them. Most conflicts, you've observed, through years of witnessing and occasionally participating in various disputes, resolve themselves if you just wait long enough. This isn't passivity, it's recognition that many conflicts are based on temporary conditions or misunderstandings that naturally dissipate over time. The aggressive young peacock who challenges territorial boundaries often moves on when he realizes the territory isn't as valuable as it appeared from a distance. The social disputes that seem catastrophic usually fade when participants lose interest or find more pressing concerns. Your conflict resolution strategy has evolved towards strategic patience, combined with dignified non-escalation. When confronted with challenges to your territory or status, you respond with just enough firmness to demonstrate that you're not weak, while avoiding the kind of dramatic escalation that turns minor disputes into major confrontations. Most challengers are looking for easy victories rather than difficult battles, and making victory difficult usually makes them look elsewhere. This approach has saved you enormous amounts of energy and stress, while achieving better long-term results than more aggressive strategies. You maintain your position through persistence and consistency, rather than through dramatic displays of dominance that require constant reinforcement. Your conflicts tend to be brief and decisive rather than extended and exhausting. Humans, you've concluded after numerous encounters and careful observation, are harmless but completely unpredictable. They pose no direct threat to your safety or territory, but their behavior follows patterns that make no sense from a peacock perspective. They appear and disappear according to schedules that seem unrelated to weather, season, or any other environmental factors you can identify. Their fascination with photographing your routine activities suggests they find ordinary peacock behavior remarkable, which is flattering but puzzling. Their tendency to bring inappropriate food offerings indicates good intentions hampered by fundamental misunderstandings of peacock nutrition. Their loud excitement about your displays suggests they appreciate your efforts, even when other peacocks find them unremarkable. You've learned to treat human encounters as pleasant diversions rather than significant events. Their presence usually correlates with improved foraging opportunities and reduced competition from other wildlife, making their visits generally beneficial despite their unpredictability. Their obvious appreciation for your magnificence provides regular ego boosts that help maintain your confidence during periods when peacock social dynamics are less supportive. The cumulative effect of this wisdom accumulation has been a gradual shift from reactive to proactive living. Instead of responding to situations as they arise, you anticipate them based on patterns you've learned to recognize. Instead of fighting against conditions you can't control, you adapt your behavior to work with those conditions effectively. Your decision-making process has become more sophisticated through experience, incorporating multiple factors and long-term consequences rather than just immediate preferences. You consider how choices will affect not just today's comfort but next week's opportunities, not just your own interests but your relationships with other birds, not just short-term gains but sustainable patterns of living. The wisdom you've accumulated isn't the kind that impresses other birds with its profundity. It's practical knowledge that makes daily life run more smoothly and satisfyingly. You've learned how to be successfully yourself rather than unsuccessfully trying to be someone else. And this knowledge has freed you from many of the anxieties and frustrations that characterized your younger years. Most importantly, you've learned that wisdom doesn't require dramatic insights or life-changing revelations. It accumulates gradually through paying attention to experience, recognizing patterns, and adjusting behavior based on what actually works rather than what you think should work. This practical wisdom has made you more effective at being a peacock and more comfortable with being exactly the peacock you are. The arrival of young peacocks seeking guidance is both flattering and exhausting, representing your transition from student to teacher in the complex social ecosystem of bird education. These eager juveniles approach you with the kind of desperate optimism typically reserved for people asking for directions in foreign countries, clearly hoping you possess knowledge that will transform their own confused fumbling into competent peacock behavior. Your first experience as an inadvertent mentor occurs when a particularly awkward young male takes up residence near your territory and begins following you around with the persistence of someone who's convinced you hold the key to all peacock mysteries. His observation technique involves standing approximately 15 feet away and staring at you with unblinking attention, as if peacock wisdom might be absorbed through sustained eye contact. The young bird's questions reveal the same fundamental misunderstandings about peacock existence that you harbored during your own early years. He wants to know the secret to impressive displays, as if there's some hidden technique that instantly transforms amateur performances into professional quality courtship. He asks about territorial strategies, as if successful property acquisition involves complex military tactics rather than persistence and patience. Your initial response to these requests for guidance is reluctant helpfulness. You never volunteered to become a teacher, and you're not entirely sure you're qualified for the role, but the youngster's obvious desperation triggers some previously unknown mentoring instinct. You find yourself offering advice that sounds suspiciously like the kind of practical guidance you wish you'd received during your own confused beginnings. Your teaching style, such as it is, tends toward the practical rather than the inspirational. When the young peacock asks how to improve his display technique, you demonstrate the basic mechanics while explaining that improvement comes through practice rather than revelation. When he inquires about territorial selection, you walk him through your own territory while pointing out the features that make locations more or less desirable for peacock habitation. Much of your advice consists of variations on "stand here" instead of "there." And that's not food. Observations that seem almost absurdly simple, but which address the fundamental errors that make young peacock life unnecessarily difficult. The significance of location selection, the importance of food identification, and the value of consistent routine. These lessons appear obvious in retrospect, but were hard-won knowledge during your own learning process. The teaching process reveals how much you've actually learned over the years. Knowledge that has become so integrated into your daily routine that you barely recognize it as expertise. When you explain why certain perching spots are superior to others, you realize you're drawing on years of experience with weather patterns, predator behavior, and social dynamics that you accumulated unconsciously through trial and error. Your student's mistakes provide entertaining echoes of your own early incompetence. He makes the same territorial errors, attempts the same ineffective hunting techniques, and displays the same unrealistic expectations about rapid improvement that characterized your own youth. Watching him struggle with challenges you've long since mastered gives you a new appreciation for how far you've actually progressed. The most valuable lessons you offer aren't technical instructions but attitude adjustments. You find yourself explaining that peacock success is measured in consistency rather than brilliance, in persistence rather than natural talent, in adaptation rather than perfection. These insights, which took you years to develop, seem to help your student more than specific technique corrections. Your reluctance to embrace the teaching role gradually diminishes as you realize that mentoring provides benefits for both parties. Explaining your methods forces you to articulate knowledge that has become instinctive, helping you understand your own competence more clearly. Watching someone else learn from your experience validates the value of the struggles you've endured and the solutions you've developed. Additional young peacocks begin seeking your guidance as word spreads that you're willing to share practical advice without excessive judgment or dramatic requirements. You develop a reputation as the bird equivalent of that neighbor who's seen everything twice and is willing to offer straightforward guidance based on actual experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Your teaching methodology evolves toward what might be called guided observation. Instead of delivering lectures about peacock technique, you invite students to accompany you during your daily routine while you explain the reasoning behind your choices. This approach allows them to see how theoretical principles translate into practical decisions in real-world situations. The questions your students ask often surprise you with their insight or their complete lack thereof. Some young peacocks want to know about the philosophical aspects of territorial ownership, while others need basic instruction in which end of an insect to eat first. The range of educational needs reminds you that learning happens at different paces for different individuals. You begin to recognize patterns in the mistakes young peacocks make, errors that seem to be universal aspects of the species' development rather than individual failings. This recognition helps you provide more targeted guidance while also giving you perspective on your own early struggles. The mistakes that felt like personal failures were actually predictable developmental challenges that every peacock faces. Your teaching sessions often devolve into storytelling, sharing accounts of your own early disasters and gradual improvements in ways that reassure students that current incompetence doesn't predict future failure. These stories serve multiple functions. They provide practical examples of problem-solving techniques, they normalize the struggle of learning peacock skills, and they remind you of how much you've actually accomplished through persistence. The mentoring relationship changes your own daily routine in subtle but significant ways. Having students observe your activities makes you more conscious of your choices and more deliberate about demonstrating good technique. You find yourself performing routine tasks with slightly more precision and explanation than necessary, turning ordinary activities into teaching opportunities. Your students' progress provides a different kind of satisfaction than your own achievements. Watching a young peacock successfully implement a technique you've taught creates a sense of contribution to the larger peacock community that goes beyond personal territory maintenance and self-preservation. You're participating in the transmission of practical knowledge that helps ensure species success. The teaching experience also reveals the limitations of your knowledge and the areas where your expertise is incomplete or specialized to your particular circumstances. Questions you can't answer remind you that wisdom is always partial and that successful peacocking involves continuous learning rather than final mastery. Eventually, Your students graduate from needing constant guidance to requesting occasional consultation, then to independent operation with periodic check-ins. This progression marks your success as a teacher and their success as students, completing a cycle that prepares them to become mentors themselves when the next generation of confused young peacocks arrives seeking guidance. Your middle years bring an unexpected development. Considerable time spent contemplating the nature of existence, though your philosophical inquiries tend toward the practical rather than the abstract. The luxury of having mastered basic survival and social integration frees mental resources for deeper consideration of what peacock life actually means, and why certain approaches to living work better than others. These philosophical sessions typically occur during your established 3 p.m. standing period, when the demands of territorial maintenance are minimal and the afternoon light creates optimal conditions for contemplation. You've learned to think profound thoughts while maintaining the appearance of alert territorial monitoring, a skill that allows for intellectual development without sacrificing practical responsibilities. Your primary philosophical conclusion, reached after years of careful observation and analysis, is that peacock existence is fundamentally about finding good spots to stand. This insight might seem simplistic to casual observers, but it represents a sophisticated understanding of how location, positioning, and presence create the foundation for all other peacock activities. The right standing spot provides security, visibility, comfort, and strategic advantage, while requiring minimal energy expenditure. This philosophy of optimal positioning extends beyond physical location to encompass social, temporal, and environmental positioning. The best times to be active, the most effective ways to interact with other birds, the optimal responses to weather conditions. All of these decisions involve finding the metaphorical, good spot to stand in various life situations. Your contemplation of weather patterns has evolved into something approaching meteorological philosophy. You've observed that weather represents one of the few completely honest forces in the natural world. It does exactly what atmospheric conditions dictate, without consideration for convenience, preference, or individual needs. This honesty makes weather an excellent teacher about adaptation, acceptance, and the value of working with, rather than against, forces beyond your control. The philosophical implications of weather extend to broader questions about control and influence in peacock life. Just as you can't control weather but can control your response to it, many aspects of daily existence involve distinguishing between what you can influence and what you must simply accommodate. This distinction has become central to your approach to everything from territorial disputes to social relationships. Food quality emerges as another significant area of philosophical consideration. You've developed sophisticated theories about the relationship between effort and reward, based on extensive research into foraging strategies and outcomes. The consistent pattern of better food requiring more effort has led you to broader insights about value, scarcity, and the importance of being willing to work for quality results. Your food philosophy encompasses questions about necessity versus preference, immediate gratification versus long-term satisfaction, and the role of patience in achieving optimal outcomes. These considerations have applications far beyond foraging, informing your approach to territorial development, social relationship management, and personal goal setting. The nature of time occupies considerable space in your philosophical framework. Peacock time operates according to rhythms that have nothing to do with human concepts of efficiency or productivity. Your daily routine follows patterns that optimize for sustainability rather than achievement, consistency rather than excitement, and long-term well-being rather than short-term accomplishment. This temporal philosophy has taught you that the most important activities often appear the least dramatic. Standing in your territory for hours at a time accomplishes multiple important objectives simultaneously: territorial maintenance, environmental monitoring, social signaling, and personal reflection, while looking like simple inactivity to uninformed observers. Your contemplation of social dynamics has led to insights about the difference between respect and popularity, authority and aggression, influence and dominance. You've observed that the most successful peacocks in your community tend to be those who achieve their objectives through consistency and reliability, rather than through dramatic displays or confrontational behavior. The social philosophy you've developed emphasizes the value of authentic self-presentation over strategic image management. Birds who try to project artificial personalities or claim capabilities they don't possess eventually face situations that expose their deceptions. Those who present themselves honestly, including their limitations, build relationships based on realistic expectations and mutual understanding. Territorial ownership has provided rich material for philosophical reflection about property, responsibility, and the relationship between place and identity. Your territory has become more than just a location. It's an extension of your personality, a reflection of your values, and a framework for your daily existence. The care you invest in maintaining and improving your territory creates a feedback loop that enhances your sense of self and purpose. The philosophy of territorial ownership extends to questions about what it means to belong somewhere and how physical spaces shape psychological states. Your territory provides not just practical benefits like food and shelter, but also psychological benefits like security, identity, and a sense of contribution to the larger ecosystem. Your observations of younger peacocks have contributed to philosophical insights about learning, growth, and the transmission of knowledge. You've noticed that the most important lessons can't be taught directly, but must be experienced personally. Your role as mentor involves creating conditions where learning can occur, rather than attempting to transfer information through instruction alone. This educational philosophy emphasizes the importance of making mistakes as part of the learning process, the value of patience in skill development, and the necessity of allowing each individual to find their own authentic approach to peacock existence. Your teaching style reflects your belief that guidance should enhance natural development rather than replace it. The cumulative effect of these philosophical inquiries has been a deepened sense of purpose and satisfaction in your daily routine. Activities that might seem mundane or repetitive to outside observers carry layers of meaning and significance when understood within the broader context of peacock existence. Your standing sessions aren't just territorial maintenance, they're active participation in the ancient peacock tradition of thoughtful presence. Your philosophy has also provided a framework for understanding your place in the larger natural world. You're not just an individual peacock pursuing personal objectives, but a participant in complex ecological and social systems that extend far beyond your immediate territory and immediate concerns. This broader perspective adds depth and significance to routine activities, while maintaining focus on practical daily requirements. The development of this philosophical framework represents perhaps your greatest achievement during middle age, not because it's particularly sophisticated or original, but because it's authentically yours and genuinely useful for navigating peacock existence. You've created a personal understanding of what your life means and how to live it well, which provides both practical guidance and psychological satisfaction. As your middle years progress, you begin to notice subtle changes that mark the transition from mature adult to distinguished senior, though the shift happens so gradually that you're more aware of others' changing reactions to you than of any dramatic internal transformations. Other birds begin treating you with a particular kind of respectful deference that suggests they recognize something in your bearing or behavior that marks you as an elder, even if you don't feel particularly elderly yourself. Your morning routine requires slightly more time than it used to, not because you've become inefficient, but because you've learned to savor the ritual aspects of your daily activities. The territorial survey that once felt like necessary business now carries ceremonial significance, marking not just your continued ownership of your space, but your ongoing participation in the ancient traditions of peacock territorial behavior. The physical changes are subtle but noticeable to you, if not necessarily to casual observers. Your tail, while still magnificent, requires more careful maintenance to achieve its full spectacular potential. Your movements have become more deliberate, not from stiffness, but from the kind of measured precision that comes from knowing exactly how much energy each activity requires and allocating that energy efficiently. Your voice has developed a quality that younger peacocks seem to find authoritative, though you're not sure exactly what's changed about it. When you speak, other birds listen with the kind of attention they reserve for important announcements, even when you're just commenting on the weather or making casual observations about territory boundaries. This newfound vocal authority feels odd but not unwelcome. The respect you receive from other peacocks has evolved from the acknowledgement of successful territorial ownership to something approaching reverence for accumulated wisdom and persistence. You've become the kind of bird other peacocks point out to visitors. That's the peacock who's been here for years, knows everything about the area, very reliable fellow. It's not the most exciting reputation, but it's solid and satisfying. Your daily standing sessions have achieved a kind of meditative perfection through years of practice and refinement. You can stand for hours in apparent alertness, while actually engaging in complex philosophical contemplation, environmental assessment, and memory review. These sessions serve multiple functions simultaneously, while appearing to be simple territorial maintenance. The younger peacocks who seek your guidance now approach with a level of formal respect that amuses and slightly embarrasses you. They treat you as if you're some kind of peacock sage, rather than just a bird who's managed to survive and maintain his territory for longer than average. Their deference forces you to live up to their expectations, which has the unexpected effect of making you more thoughtful and deliberate in your responses. Your territory has reached mature development after years of careful refinement. Every perch, sightline, and foraging ground has been optimized through experience. What once demanded constant effort now operates as a balanced system that supports both comfort and security. Social life too has settled. Consistency has made your behavior predictable, building a reputation for reliability that shapes how others approach you. Conflicts rarely require direct involvement. You practice dignified non-participation, intervening only when necessary with calm firmness. The result is harmony without needless escalation. A role you once resisted teaching has become deeply fulfilling. Sharing wisdom with younger peacocks ensures lessons hard-won through trial and error are not lost. Your style is consultative rather than intrusive. You offer guidance when asked, respecting each bird's path while keeping knowledge accessible. This mentoring creates continuity, extending your influence beyond your own territory. Through middle years, your philosophy has crystallized. You value authenticity over appearances, consistency over spectacle, and sustainability over short-term gain. Seasonal changes no longer disrupt but enrich your rhythm. Where you once reacted, you now anticipate reading subtle cues in light, wind, and wildlife to prepare before shifts arrive. Spring brings systematic renewal. Boundaries reinforced, alliances refreshed, body strengthened. Courtship, once stressful, now follows efficient protocols that balance effort with outcome. Summer has evolved from endurance to optimization. Shade managed, foraging timed to predictable patterns, activity adapted to heat. Fall transitions are equally practiced, molting scheduled, shelters improved, caches stored, alliances secured. Winter, once a trial, is now a season of reflection. Your shelter, resources, and social bonds sustain you in comfort. Each cycle has become partnership rather than struggle. This mastery has raised you from awkward youth to the kind of seasoned adult you once admired. Your life may not dazzle with spectacle, but it carries authenticity and satisfaction. Daily routines, refined into seamless sequences, waste no energy yet remain flexible enough for the unexpected. Your influence extends beyond your own survival. Territory management practices, conflict resolution strategies, and seasonal preparation routines are studied and adopted by others. Younger birds carry forward your teachings, transmitting them across generations. Your calm approach to disputes has fostered broader social stability, while your mentoring bridges age groups into networks of mutual support. Even human visitors have been shaped by your presence. Learning from your behavior what peacocks are like, your territory functions almost as a demonstration site, teaching both birds and outsiders about balance, optimization, and resilience. Legacy has become a quiet realization rather than dramatic revelation. Improvements you've made to land and culture will endure for future inhabitants. Knowledge you've shared will ripple through chains of mentorship long after you're gone. Your influence lies not in grand gestures but in steady contributions, raising standards of behavior, deepening ecological awareness, and enriching community life. With age, your understanding of time has expanded. You perceive not just daily rhythms and yearly cycles but multi-year trends in climate, resources, and population. Evidence of previous generations reminds you that you are a custodian, not sole owner, of this place. Your role is to strengthen its suitability for those who come after. This perspective shapes your priorities. You contribute not only for yourself but for continuity, honoring those who taught you by passing their wisdom forward, adjusted through your own experience. Even human observers, fascinated by your daily rituals, remind you that your existence resonates beyond species and time. Contemplating mortality brings not fear but focus. Knowing life is temporary heightens appreciation for the present, while encouraging generosity in sharing what you know. Your routines have acquired ceremonial weight, linking you to countless predecessors who followed similar cycles. Ultimately, you've learned that significance comes not from spectacle but from steady, authentic contribution. By living with reliability, ecological sensitivity, and commitment to community, you've shaped a legacy that will persist. In the rhythms of territory, the continuity of teaching, and the wisdom of perspective, your life has become part of something larger than yourself, an enduring thread woven into the fabric of peacock existence. The transition into what might charitably be called your golden years happens with the same understated grace that has characterized most of your life. Gradually, without fanfare, and in ways that are more noticeable to you than to casual observers, your magnificent tale remains magnificent, a testament to years of careful maintenance and genetic good fortune, though achieving that magnificence now requires considerably more effort and strategic positioning than it once did. The daily preening routine that was once a simple maintenance task has evolved into something approaching physical therapy. Each feather receives individual attention, not just for aesthetic reasons, but because neglecting any part of your plumage now results in consequences that take weeks rather than days to correct. You've learned to work with your body's changing needs rather than against them, adapting your grooming schedule to accommodate joints that prefer gentle movement and feathers that require more patient handling. Your tail spread, while still capable of impressive displays under optimal conditions, now operates according to a more selective schedule. The casual displays you once performed for minor territorial announcements have been replaced by carefully planned presentations, reserved for situations that genuinely warrant the energy expenditure. You've learned to make your displays count, focusing on quality over frequency in ways that actually make them more impactful when they occur. Flying has transitioned from a practical transportation method to what you prefer to think of as a theoretical possibility. You can still achieve flight when circumstances absolutely require it, but you've developed sophisticated ground-based alternatives for most situations that previously would have involved aerial solutions. Your walking has become more deliberate as compensation, with each step carefully placed and purposefully directed. The deliberate pace of your movements isn't a limitation so much as a refinement of efficiency. You waste no energy on unnecessary motion, having learned exactly how much effort each activity requires and how to accomplish your objectives with minimal physical stress. Your movement style has evolved from enthusiastic inefficiency to economical precision. You've earned the right to be particular about your food and roosting spots, and you exercise this right with the confidence of someone who has paid their dues through years of accepting whatever was available. The premium insects you once worked so hard to catch now come to you through a combination of reputation, strategic positioning, and the kind of patience that only comes with age and experience. Your dietary standards have evolved to focus on nutrition and digestibility, rather than novelty or challenge. You know exactly which foods provide optimal energy with minimal digestive effort, which locations offer the best foraging opportunities at different times of day, and how to position yourself to take advantage of food sources that younger, more energetic birds overlook in their pursuit of more dramatic prey. Young birds now seem incredibly energetic and slightly annoying in their constant motion and need for dramatic achievement. You watch their frantic activity with the amused tolerance of someone who remembers being that exhausting, but can barely imagine having that much surplus energy. Their mistakes are familiar echoes of your own early incompetence. Though you find yourself less patient with witnessing inefficiency than you expected to be, the teaching requests from younger peacocks continue, though your teaching style has evolved toward what might be called consultative grumpiness. You're willing to share knowledge with birds who demonstrate genuine interest in learning, but you have little patience for those who want quick answers to complex questions, or who seem to expect that wisdom can be transferred without effort or experience. Your roster spot has been refined to a small selection of premium locations that offer maximum comfort with minimum maintenance requirements. The days of sleeping wherever convenient have been replaced by a carefully curated collection of roosting sites, each selected for specific weather conditions, security considerations, and comfort factors that your younger self would have considered unnecessarily fussy. Your territory has shifted from sprawling boundaries to a smaller, carefully optimized domain. What once required anxious patrols is now distilled into one prime perch, a reliable feeding ground, solid shelter options, and enough buffer for privacy. Quality has replaced quantity, creating comfort and efficiency without unnecessary strain. Downsizing demanded acceptance, letting go of former ambitions, acknowledging changing strength, and embracing new priorities. Yet this reduction feels less like loss and more like retirement continued ownership with lighter responsibilities. Your daily patrol, though shorter, carries the satisfaction of reviewing a perfected space, refined by years of experience. Other peacocks recognize this not as weakness but as wisdom, a model of efficient living they hope to emulate. Conflicts are resolved through strategic grumpiness, signals of displeasure that rarely escalate but discourage challengers. With fewer duties, you spend more time in contemplative presence, perfecting what you call the art of dignified lounging, choosing resting places that balance comfort, authority, and awareness. Your life has been ordinary but authentic, built on routine, adaptation, and quiet contribution. Legacy lies not in grand drama but in community stability, knowledge passed forward, and territory left prepared for successors. Ordinary, yes, but meaningful, sustainable, and deeply satisfying.